Well, the Duke University men's basketball team lost their Final Four game over the weekend, but the basketball game is not the only thing that Duke University has lost recently. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about that here on the Dr. Matters podcast that starts right now. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Dr. Matters podcast. It's good to be back with you here to do another episode, and I am thankful that you are listening and tuning in, whether it be YouTube or an audio platform of your choosing. Thank you for listening, and today's episode is one of those that is just kind of gross, and as I mentioned in the intro, I told you that the Duke men's basketball team lost their Final Four game over the weekend, and again, that is not all that Duke University has lost, and you may be wondering, what in the world am I talking about? You may have seen the thumbnail. You may have seen the title of this episode. So let's just jump right into this, and this is going to really piggyback off of the LGBTQ agenda. As you know, that the LGBTQ agenda is being pushed everywhere still. It is something that is not going away. As a matter of fact, the deeper we get into this thing, the more vile and disgusting it has become. And this time, we're going to look at something that is just absolutely ridiculous and absolutely disgusting, if you will. We're going to be looking at men who are able to breastfeed. And not only men, they call themselves transgender men. As a matter of fact, let's look at this picture here. This is what sparked this episode, because I was wondering if this was really real, because, you know, you come across things on the internet sometimes and you don't know if it's really real or not. So you have to investigate and you do a little digging, and it doesn't take long sometimes till you see that some of the things that you don't want to be true are actually true, because you see credible sources that share them. Now, I believe this picture was from the New York Post here, and let's just look at this. It says, trans grandma able to breastfeed baby with help of experimental hormone drugs. Now, let's stop and think about this just for a second. There has been an uptick in over the last few years, and then, of course, the president has cut this off for people under 18 years old. But there has been a history, especially within the last political term, of men and women, and I must say young men and young women, receiving hormones or hormone blockers to transition from either male to female or female to male. And a lot of this was happening in the juvenile frame of age bracket. That's the word I'm looking for, or the two words I'm looking for. It happened in the juvenile age bracket. So that means many children under the age of 18, their parents allowed them to get these hormone blockers or hormones that would allow them to transition. Now, obviously, we have seen that in the juvenile bracket, but this is also happening all over the place for adults. As a matter of fact, I was in a local pet feed store just the other day, and I saw this man who wanted to be a female who had had a breast enhancement, but clearly was a male, walking around with his daughter / granddaughter. I'm not sure, but it's happening everywhere, even in small towns like Jonesboro, Arkansas. These things are happening. They're taking place. And man, it's a result of people who are rejecting the truth of God, that there is a God, and they're believing lies. I've heard it said once that if you run from the truth, all there's left to believe are the lies. And that's essentially what atheism is. That is essentially what agnosticism is. It's you suppress the truth, as Romans chapter 1 says, that there is a God. So you go chasing these other beliefs and other systems, and you're believing the lies that those systems have to offer because you've run from or suppressed the actual truth to where there's nothing else to believe but the lies. And that's where we've come with this transitioning, because we know the Bible says that God created man and woman, male and female. He created them. Those male and females are supposed to marry, have children. Those children are supposed to grow up, meet a member of the opposite sex, get married, have children, and on it goes, being fruitful and multiplying. However, we have people who are throwing their hands up and their fist up at what God has designed for the human race and saying that is not what I want to do. They're rebelling against the scripture. They're rebelling against the God of the Bible, and they're going out and changing their bodies, doing what they want to do. And that's not even the half of it. There's people that are shaking their fist at God saying that I want to kill my baby. I want to be gay, transgender. I want to be able to nurse my grandbaby, apparently, as we see here on the screen, if you're still looking at the screen. So many things that are just happening in our world, and it's a result of suppressing the truth that there is a God. That's the ultimate root cause of all of the things that are happening in our world today that are not of God. And yesterday I preached a sermon, and in that sermon I said that anything pursued apart from holiness is sin, and it will not fulfill, it will not satisfy, it will not sustain. It is sin and will always leave us wanting more. And we're seeing that come to life right here, because it's not enough that this man wanted to be a woman, but he's still a man to me. I can't bring myself to say ma'am to this person who's clearly a male. But this man wanted to be a male or a female so bad she became quote unquote a female. He is a transgender, and that wasn't enough, because you're always going to want more and more and more when you neglect and reject the God of the Bible and his design for humanity. So much so that now we have a transgendered grandmother, actually grandfather, if you will, that is now wanted to breastfeed his grandbabies. So there has been some experimental hormone drugs that have allowed this person to breastfeed his grandbaby. Now, this is terrible in and of itself, and it is just something that is disgusting. But let me show you this. We're going to read this story. So I went to search it, and it was from Duke University. And this is the story. Let me find it again. This is the story that it relates to. And this is the Chronicle. This is the Duke Chronicle. So it comes from Duke University. It's written, it's the paper for the university. And the headline says, Duke health researchers publish study on hormone modification to enable lactation in transgender women. If that alone is not enough to make you go, huh? Then I don't know what would make you go scratch your head and wonder what's going on here. But let's just walk through this, shall we? This says, Duke researchers published a study on using hormone modification technology to enable transgender women to lactate. The report, titled Novel Lactation Induction Protocol for a Transgender Woman Wishing to Breastfeed, a case report, was published on March 27th in the National Library of Medicine. It is the fifth report ever published on lactation for a transgender woman, but is the only one that use metoclopramide for lactation induction. Research was conducted by the third-year medical student Esme Treasure, clinical pharmacist Sarah Kakosa, researcher Andy Weinhold, researcher Heather Parnell, associate professor of medicine Carly Kelly, and Andrea Dotson, assistant professor in family medicine and community health. The subject of the study, a 50-year-old anonymous, wonder why this man is anonymous, transgender woman, began to receive gender-affirming hormone therapy in 2018 and sought to breastfeed her grandchild in 2022. According to the report, the woman's primary motivation for inducing lactation was to experience the bond from breastfeeding that she had not been able to experience with her own 5 children. Full stop. Right here. Let's stop. The reason that, quote unquote, she was unable to experience breastfeeding with her own 5 children is because she is a he, and he's don't breastfeed. She's breastfeed. His wife. or girlfriend or whatever their situation was at the time that they have had 5 children is the one that experienced the breastfeeding because she had the makeup to produce a child. This man does not have the genetic makeup, the anatomy, the physiology, all the things, all the words you want to use here, doesn't have what it takes to produce a baby, therefore doesn't have what it takes to breastfeed a child. And unless some man-made, demonic, disgusting thing comes into its arena and begins to put together something that allows this terrible sin to happen. So there's a reason that he wasn't able to experience breastfeeding with his 5 children, is because God created him a male and not a female. Let's continue reading here. Within 4 weeks of beginning a modified hormone regimen, which included 10 milligrams of metoclopramide, so I don't know how to say this, 3 times daily, let's just say the hormone 3 times daily, the patient was able to lactate. The woman reported producing breast milk over a period of 2 weeks, during which she breastfed her 4-month-old granddaughter multiple times. Since breastfeeding the infant, the patient reported an emotional bond with her grandchild and female gender affirmation, as noted by her reports that breastfeeding felt very different from formula feeding her other children. You can't make this stuff up, and if you did, you'd be a weirdo. My goodness. This man noted in the report that it felt very different from formula feeding his other children. That's because when you formula feed, if you don't have any children, here's why it's different. When you formula feed a baby, you feed it with a bottle, not your own personal nipples, not your own personal breasts. So I don't understand what is, I think there is a mental issue here. I know some people would get mad at me for saying that, but I can't help but wonder what is going on in their mind when they even have to say things like, well, it felt very different from formula feeding my other children. Yeah, because now there's a baby latched onto your body, whereas before there was a bottle latched onto your hand and then the bottle put to baby's mouth. There is going to be a definite different feeling there. So just to say those words, like normal people are going to say, yeah, there's a big difference, right? So I just wonder what's happening with people, man. Is the mental health crisis as big as we think it is, or is it bigger? Because this is mentally disturbing. Let's go on and finish this thing. Since breastfeeding the infant, the patient reported an emotional bond with her grandchild and female gender affirmation. We read that, as noted by her reports, feeling very different than formula feeding her other children. She stated she has a special bond with this baby for which she is grateful. There's going to be a special bond, I'm sure. I pray that God would let this baby grow up and see the error of this man's ways, and even her mother for allowing this to happen. And I pray God would save this child and she would come out of this. And I pray God would save this man who has turned woman, who has turned breastfeeding grandmother, grandfather, really, and save him. I pray that this baby's mother would be saved. I pray the whole family would be saved and they would get out of this demonic type situation. But nevertheless, let's continue to see what Duke University says here. The patient did not experience any side effects from this therapy. Now, let me just say this for a second. There are a lot of experimental things out there in the market right now, whether it be from weight loss drugs to hormone pills or shots, or even this hormone here that has allowed this man to produce milk somehow. There are no short-term side effects, obviously. But when you think about all of these things that are being pumped into people's body, there has to be some sort of long-term effect that just hasn't reared its ugly face yet. There are a lot of cases that are just continuing to pour in of people who have taken the COVID shot. The various things are happening to them as a result of that shot. There are people who have taken weight loss shots and now started experiencing some long-term side effects, some things that weren't there originally. So we have to wonder what kind of side effects is going to be down the line for this person. because this is not natural. This is not supernatural. This is man-made things that are being pumped into another person. So we can't really know what's to come of this until we see it all play out. If that's even going to be played out in front of a camera or in front of a newspaper article, we just don't know yet. But I mean, you got to think that it's not going to be good with something that is just so wicked as this. She goes on to say, she said she wished she had known about this option earlier on and hopes other transgender women can similarly realize their breastfeeding goals. The report concluded by emphasizing the need for further research on lactation protocols for transgender individuals and a greater understanding of the priorities of the transgender patients who wish to lactate. That is mentally disturbing, that men want to lactate. That is unreal. And we're allowing this to happen in our world. I wonder how many times this person has come in contact with a professing believer who never once heard the gospel. Maybe this person has heard the gospel many times, is just continuing to suppress the truth that there is a God. But even in his sin, he is suppressing the truth that there is a God anyway, because Romans chapter 1 tells us that even by his invisible attributes in creation itself, that he is leaving no one without excuse, that there is truly a God, and this person is truly suppressing that. But I wonder how many people he has come in contact with that have preached the gospel or may profess to be a Christian, but simply has not carried out their duty to make disciples. And that part of making disciples means that there needs to be a clear gospel presentation to those in their care and in front of them, and be able to preach the gospel. I just can't help but wonder that. But let's just make sure that I'm missing nothing interesting here. The Chronicle requested an interview with an author of the study who forwarded the request to the Duke Health News Office. The office did not respond for comment. So, man, we have just wild things happening in our world. And if there is ever a time for believers to stand up and begin to actually do what they've been called to do by God, and that is to preach Christ and Christ crucified, it's now. The more we allow this to continue, the more we allow people to continue down these paths, the more turmoil we're going to see, the more things are going to happen that we wish we would not see. Like I think some of these long-term side effects will kick in. I think we'll see some more health issues take place. But just the sickness of a man wanting to breastfeed, and then people allowing that and doing studies and putting together hormones to make sure that they inject it into these people so they can get what they want, is terrifying. And let me just say, there is a form of judgment with God that allows people to continue on in their sin to get exactly what they want. And this could lead to death for this person because of their quote unquote wanting and desiring to lactate as a man. You see, it's not enough that he became a woman, or a transgender at least. I don't know the significance of transgender here for this person. I don't know if there were surgeries or just hormones that made him look like a woman. We don't know the ins and outs of what's going on, but I do know this. I did a video about 2 years ago, and I want to play part of that video, and really, I want you to hear from a transgender's mouth about how terrible they feel for doing what they've done. Now, I do want to warn you that as we listen to this, there is going to be some language associated with it, but I do believe it is going to be very important for this conversation because we're actually hearing it from the mouth of someone who's gone through some of these hormone blockers, gone through some of these things and issues that other people are continuing to go through now. So this is a video I did, 2 years ago, and it is called Detransitioning in the Upcoming Storm. And I want you to hear from this person and I can leave the link to the whole video here in the description, so you can go back and watch this on your own time. But we're going to watch about 5-6 minutes of what this person has said, because it just goes perfectly here. So let me get this set up here. And then what I am going to do is add that. We're going to make it full screen, and I'm going to go off the screen, and we're just going to watch. Out there for the sake of saying, hey, look at this. I've got, but let's listen to, make sure that you hearable. Not too, just a little bit.
My mind is a place that I can't escape your ghost. I was listening to Wrecked by Imagine Dragons, and sometimes I do that when I know that I need to let go of some emotions, because I felt like really angry today. I stumbled upon a YouTube channel. I think it's the Mohit Show or something like that. And he goes and reads out posts that are made on the D-Trans Reddits, subreddits, the D-Trans ones. And it makes me angry, because some days, like most days, I'm okay, but this stuff kind of brings up I'm angry. What's gonna happen to the kids and the youth? And there's so many people who regret this, and their stories are all on there. So I would highly suggest Reddit is not, I'm not a big fan of Reddit. I found the energy there was really weird, but it did help me when I was questioning some stuff to go on the D-Trans Reddit and read other people's experiences. But you know what is gonna happen? There's more and more and more coming out, and younger too, in their early 20s, on puberty blockers, that been on puberty blockers. And you know, I read one that, you know, I think he went on puberty blockers at 16, and now he's like 20 or 21, and he is like suicidal because his penis won't grow anymore. Like, it does damage his it makes me so angry. It makes me so angry. And what we're gonna get is a generation that's screwed up. That are screwed up in like 10, 15 years. Wait, not even. I think it's accelerating quite quickly. And which is good. Good as in it's accelerating quickly, as like I think that people are starting to speak up quicker. I don't know if it's because there's a raise in consciousness or something. I don't know, but man, when we get 30, 40-year-olds that are going to be like, what the fuck did I do when I was 16 or whatever, like, and you can't go back. You can't go back. And like I said, in this song, my mind is a place that I can't escape your ghost. I can't escape this. And most of the time I'm okay. Most of the time I'm fine. Excuse me. But when I see stories of other people, it just really hurts me. Because, I'm one person and I can handle my decisions and the shitty things that the doctors didn't do for me or whatever, okay? But what about all the others? I don't know. Anyways, I'm going to the beach. I'm parked and I'm going to read The Mastery of Love again and just try to let this go. I'm sad for myself, of course. Not in a victim kind of way, but in like, I need to, this process of mourning who I was is touch and go. So, but I'm sad for humanity and the children and what's gonna happen when they're screwed up. We're gonna see what's gonna happen. And I really, really hope that all these professionals get their friggin' karma, because I know that some of them don't realize and some of them might be brainwashed and whatever, but some of them know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. Cash cowing, making cash cow out of these people. And more. I'm not going to go into what I believe is behind it. But anyways, I'm going to head to the beach now and try to release this shit in the water. I swear.
Oh, man, that is a heartbreaking thing to hear from someone who has transitioned, and to hear of the coming storm of those who are going to be feeling the same way. And we as believers need to be prepared, number one, to preach the gospel and warn as many people as we can if we come across anyone that is heading into this transitional phase of their life and wanting to do this to their body. But we also need to be prepared for those who have done it, who are coming out of it and feel the weight and the shame and the guilt of their sin. And we need to be able to love them enough to preach the gospel to them, not to say, I told you so. But there is something that I think that when we think of the LGBTQ just as a whole, this thing is crept into churches. I've done a ton of videos about that, so I'm not going to continue to do that and talk about that here. But it's something that many people that profess Christ would say, well, it's, we're supposed to love everybody. We're supposed to embrace everybody and love everybody and accept everybody. And that is simply not true, that we love them in their sin and we encourage them and we condone their sin. We must tell them the truth of the gospel. And we must tell them the truth of a just God who will judge accordingly. We're preaching through the book of Hosea in my church. And the Israelites have they've gone after false gods. They have false worship. They are idolaters, and they have forgotten the covenantal God that they once loved. But He hasn't forgotten them, and He hasn't forgotten the covenant they made, or that He made with His people. And they're running from Him, and they're living in sin and rampant sin and unrepentant sin. And in Hosea chapter 4 and verse 9, we read this: and it shall be like people, like priests, I will punish them for their ways and repay them for their deeds. If you know someone who is transitioning or has done the transitioning or approves of the LGBTQ lifestyle or any of those things, I pray that you would tell them and warn them of a coming judgment, that God will judge sin. Sin will be punished, and it will be paid for by us. If you're not a believer, it will be paid for by you. It will be paid for by them. Or if you are a believer, or if they become a believer, it has been paid for by Christ Jesus on the cross by receiving the full wrath of God. They need to hear the gospel. They need to be discipled. They need to be pointed to Christ, simply put. And we have to be people that are willing to hate that sin, but be encouraged enough by who God is and what God has done for us and who God is in our lives, to be able to take the gospel to them, because there's coming a day where there will be justice for these people. And we have to do whatever we can in our power, if we come across these folks, to be able to show them Christ and point them to the gospel, not condone their sin, and not to quote unquote love them, as a lot of people would like to say, and welcome them in and condone their sin, but we love them enough to teach them the gospel. So, man, Duke University has not only lost their men's basketball game in the Final Four, but they have lost their way when they try to, or have succeeded in, allowing a man to lactate and feed his granddaughter. Just a terrible time that we find ourselves living in, but it's nothing new. If you read the Bible, there is sickness and there's sin and there's all kinds of things all throughout the scriptures. And the only thing that can remedy that is Christ. May he be preached. May he be exalted, and may we preach Christ to the nations and pray that God would save many. Thank you for listening. Until next time, God bless.